Welcome to the Paper Snob. This is December's edition of Mad About Mini Paper Pads. I will have a playlist linked down below for you to hop along with all of this participating for the month of December. It is so close to Christmas. I hope you guys are ready. Have you wrapped your presents? We've got most of them done at the time I recorded this. We're waiting for a couple to come in the mail. Hopefully by the time this goes live, that will have happened and they'll be wrapped and under the tree. So, what I have for you today, let me show you my photos. I am doing a throwback to, I think these were taken in May of 2016. And I had grown some stuff in a container garden in my backyard. And these, I think, are probably my first harvest. I do really well with tomatoes, and one of my tomato plants was almost as tall as I am prior to these being taken. And then this past year, 2023, not 2024, when we were in Kentucky, I had tomatoes that were as big as my hand, that I have taken pictures of holding them in my hand. We ate a lot of tomato soup in 2023. In 2024, I didn't get to put out a garden because we moved, and I didn't realize that we had a long enough growing season here in Colorado. I could have still put out tomato plants and been fine, but I didn't know, and so now I do. Anyway, I have the Simple Stories Full Bloom thickers. I know they're not thickers, but they're the foam stickers like thickers. I have this burlap stencil that I got from my advent calendar from Some Assemblage Required this year. I have not gotten to use it yet, so I'm going to use it today. I have my Pink Fresh Studios ink. It is dough and a brush. And then I have 2 mini paper pads. I am trying to make myself use up this wood grain paper pad, so we'll see what I do with that. And then I have this paper pad from Little Yellow Bicycle, which means it's ancient since they are no longer in business. I don't see a date on it, but I have most of it left. Some of it will work for these photos, and so I've pulled those to work with this set of photos. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to get started with this. I'll be right back. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some burlap stenciling on this white background. I just feel like that this would be way too much white space for my liking. So I want to just get a little bit on here. It's not going to be perfect. I'm just kind of placing it here and there. I think I do end up putting it in a few places that I cover up, but otherwise I really love how this stencil works and how it looks. It's pretty fun, and I think I'm going to use it for another layout for next week as well, so stay tuned for that. So I'm just kind of placing it here and there, getting a little bit of color on here. I know that I'm going to be covering up that middle section with my paper, so let's get started with that. So I chose 6 different patterned papers, and I'm going to cut a 2x6 inch strip from each. The 4x6 pieces that I have left over, I will set aside for another time, although I think I dig into a couple of them for this layout in the end. I use them for, forget what I grabbed them for, maybe for matting the photos. Anyway, so I have all 6 cut, and I have a frame from that wood grain paper pad. It was cut and not used previously, and it's just been sitting inside that paper pad. So I'm going to use it today for that photo. I know that the photo is a little bit large. It's okay. I'm going to trim it down. And then I have 3 scraps from that wood grain paper pad that I'm going to also use. And I'm going to cut 6 hexagons with it, 2 from each, so that I have a little bit of embellishment. Most of this layout is just going to be from the paper pads. So first things first, I'm going to line up my white cardstock on my mat, and I'm going to place these strips in the center, and you do that by placing them at the 3 to 6 inch marks on the mat, and that helps you line them up perfectly. I'm also going to cut into, I think this one that I'm placing down has the striped back or striped border on the back, and I end up cutting 5 strips of that to use on this layout to add some more colors. I decided to use the striped piece to just bring all of those colors together. They're nice colors together, but I felt like that striped piece kind of brought them together. And I know that I have a little bit of the green piece hanging over the side. That's going to be okay. I will trim it off. I'm not real sure how that happened, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to start putting this little frame on my photo. I'm just using my wet glue to do that. I will trim it off by, I think I used my trimmer to actually trim it off. I started to say I'm going to trim it off by hand, but I think I actually used my trimmer to trim off that little hanging edge. I think that is a die that I have in my stash that I had used to cut that out with, and I just didn't use it for whatever layout I started to use it on. What I'm looking for now is probably a sheet of paper to mat the other 2 photos. I love that green and blue gingham, and I really considered using it, but I didn't. So I put it back. I didn't feel like the green and blue gingham met the requirements that I had in my head for this layout. Mostly, I will admit that I'm kind of winging it here, which is something that I do occasionally. I just kind of wing things through. I knew what products I wanted to use, but not exactly how they were going to go together. Now, usually when I make a border like this in the center of my layout, I put the striped borders along the top and the bottom of those middle sections, but this time I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to place a striped border on each edge in the interior of this design. Like I said, I felt like the stripe just kind of brings all of those colors together perfectly. It's a really pretty collection. I don't think I had it in 12 by 12 back when it first came out. Not even sure where I bought a 6 by 6 paper pad. I've never been one to really use them, and so anyway, but I have a whole bunch of them these days because I do use them a little more often than I did 10, 15 years ago. So here's what I meant by putting them on the seams, on the interior of my striped pattern paper background. And I like how that looks so far. I love the burlap stenciling sticking out of the top. I think it kind of just reminds me of dirt a little bit because of the color that I used, and that goes along with my gardening theme, so I thought it was perfect. So I have matted my photos. Now I'm going to trim down the mats. I will save the larger portion from each pattern paper, but I'm going to toss the smaller pieces because I don't think that I will use those small pieces. I'm trying not to save all of the little scraps that I used to save all the time because I discovered I really wasn't using them. So I'm going to place these pictures kind of in a collage in the middle. I'm leaving a relatively large space in between that top photo with my hand and the tomato photo on the bottom because I'm going to put my journaling there, and so that is intentional. A lot of times I will meet the pictures together in the center when I do this design, but for this layout I'm leaving it open so that I can add a label there for journaling, and I end up taking the label actually from the pattern paper. As I was digging through the pattern paper, I realized that one of them had a label on it, so I'm going to cut that out here in a few minutes. I'm using those hexagon pieces that I cut out with my punch from the wood grain just kind of as cluster bases, and I'm adding the sun up there, and that top one, I'm going to add these bees down here just for some more color. I love that the Simple Stories collection actually matches the little yellow bicycle story so well. That's kind of fun to me. And now I'm going to kind of go off camera for a minute and come back. So I pulled out my Felicity Jane labels. I had those out earlier this week, and I thought, you know, I'm going to try to use these. And then I'm going to cut out a label from this piece of pattern paper that I just used to punch out those leafy bits. So I said that I was going to journal on this label. Actually, what I do is I put it down on that cluster of hexagons on the lower left-hand side, along with some of my punched out leafy bits. This is just a small handmade embellishment cluster. I'm using the front and back of this pattern paper. The pattern paper is the same color on both sides, but it also is a different pattern on both sides. And I didn't realize how well that sun was sticking down, so I tried to move it to stick the leafy bit underneath it. I didn't get it all the way under there, and that is okay. So I'm just going to start gluing down these photos. Here, I tried to move that sun again, and it's just not coming off, which is quite surprising. So I'm just using the wet glue to glue down those hexagons all of the way so that they won't come off in the page protector later. I trimmed down the leaf cluster a little bit so that I could fit it underneath the sun, and then I'm pretty happy with that setup so far. I am adding some of the Felicity Jane labels in the center, but I want to finish off this little embellishment cluster down here on that lower left. I like the little flower that I added, so that makes me kind of happy, and I'm just kind of tacking it down with some glue here. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple of these labels and stick them together and just kind of stick them in the middle, and then I will journal on them. All right, I got my layout completely finished. Off camera, I came in and I journaled and I dated my photos. At the beginning of the video, I said that they were May photos. They were actually September photos. So they're probably one of the last harvests from my little container garden that year rather than the first. And I am pretty tickled with being able to use so many different patterns on here, getting that wood grain, a lot of those wood grain scraps out of that little mini paper pad that I have actually been hoarding for a long time because it's wood grain and it's gorgeous. Would have loved to have that in the 12 by 12 paper pad, but I only could find it in the 6 by 6. I bought it and I've just been kind of hoarding it, so I'm glad that I was able to make some embellishments with it. The frame was a frame that I made with a die cut previously, didn't use it for whatever layout that I prepared that die cut for, and I just put it back in the mini paper pad so that it would still be there the next time. And so I'm glad to get that on here as well. I want to thank you so much for coming to my channel today. I really appreciate those of you who take the time to like, comment, and or subscribe. You guys have helped me build this channel. I am so stinking grateful for that, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you are new here, please go ahead and subscribe. I would love to have you subscribe. Decided to add something else right here at the end. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate you. You guys have a great Christmas with your families. Bye.